Welcome to Access Utah. I'm Tom Williams. Today we're going to check in again. It's been a little while since I've checked in with Susan Madsen, who's director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project. And Susan, also a professor in the School of Business, I believe, right?
Yes, I'm a professor of organizational leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University, and also work with as a specialist in USU Extension.
Oh, Extension. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense, right?
The Utah Women in Leadership Project really does fit well in Extension because our mission is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women, and we're really statewide. And so we work with statewide campuses as well. And so we're in all 29 counties doing work, trying to strengthen girls and women, and also with our bolder way forward, and I can definitely talk more about that. Our mission there for the state is to ensure that more girls, women, and their families are thriving. And not just here in Logan, not just along the Wasatch Front, but in Paiute, in Daggett, in Kane County, in San Juan. I know my 29 Utah counties now.
Even Daggett. You mentioned Daggett.
Yes, that's our smallest one, about 900
It is.
people who live there,
Yeah.
and Garfield, and of course Washington and Iron County. Right. And so I've been to every single county, believe it or not, Tom.
Yeah.
And actually during the pandemic, can I just say, my husband and I wanted to get out here and there, and we, in a little over a year, visited every single city or town in the entire state, even if they were ghost towns.
Ghost towns, too. Right?
Hiawatha in Carbon County went 20 miles out and found a ghost town. And so it's been so interesting to look at the entire state. That's one of the reasons I really love being at Utah State University, is that we're a land-grant university, as you well know, Tom, which means we're all over the state. And so I love, I've run events in every single county and listened to leaders and residents in community conversations all around the state. It's been fascinating.
I'm curious, you and your husband went out to all those little towns and big towns, right? And all 29 counties, including ghost towns. What did you take away from that?
Well, first of all, there's a big map you can buy that is two-sided that gets you a really big look. And I bought these little color-coded things for state parks, national parks. We visited those too, all the state parks. And there's some awesome ones that you wouldn't think. And drove all over. And I really challenged myself, because I love trees and water and certain kinds of things, to really look for the beauty in every single place that we went. And my takeaway is there's beauty, no matter if it's a bunch of rocks or a bunch of trees or things in between, that Utah's an amazing state. Just even if you don't connect with a lot of people, if you're just driving through. And wow, what a variety of scenery that we have in this state. So after doing that, I thought, wow, you really couldn't get bored if you're going from, over to Vernal. And we found cool stuff over in Vernal, a little canyon with various things. So it just made me continue to be proud that I'm in a state like Utah.
What are the overall goals of Utah Women in Leadership Project?
So our goals are really, our mission is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. Been doing that for about 16, 17 years. And we do that really in three ways. One is that we produce really great, rigorous research reports. Different kinds of research reports. But that's what people will tell when people from all over the state talk about the Utah Women in Leadership Project. That's the number one thing they'll say, is they're the ones that do research on girls and women in the state of Utah. So we have reports, Tom, as you know, on all kinds of topics. I'm a leadership professor and published on women's leadership. And so people from time to time are like, why are you publishing a report on domestic violence? Or the pay gap. The pay gap kind of makes sense in my space, but child sexual abuse or health. And the reason is because they all impact a woman's voice, a woman's confidence, a woman's ambitions. All of them impact. And when you've experienced rape, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and about 1 in 6 women will experience that, 1 in 7 kids. Those are hard topics to talk about. That impacts a lot of people, and that impacts a lot of women. And so we do reports on everything from entrepreneurship to women in politics to all of those kinds of reports on any topic, honestly, and we're still producing more. So people know about that. But then we also produce resources. We have a podcast and infographics and all kinds of things that are research-based. So I'm a professor. I want the right information, but not everybody's going to read a report. So how do we get that out there? Radio shows like this, thanks for having me on, Tom, are good ways to do that as well. And then we also hold events, and we partner with so many. We have about 350 partners now with the Boulder Way Forward, which is an initiative within UWLP. So those are the basic things that we do. And we've been doing this work for 16, 17 years now. It was supposed to be a 1-year project, Tom.
1-year project.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
I was asked by the Commissioner of Higher Education and the governor's office to do some initial work on why more women weren't going to college and graduating. And then people kept asking for more data. How about women in politics? How about women on corporate boards? How about this and that? And so it's really emerged into, and I could have closed the loop a long time ago, but when people are asking and really want to make decisions based on good research, that's what we need to do more of. It was hard to say no.
Yeah. Let me just underline Utah Women in Leadership podcast. Utah Public Radio helps to produce that. It's a nice partnership. And you can go to upr.org to link over to that podcast. Tell me a little bit more about the Boulder Way Forward. This is a kind of a new-ish initiative.
Well, 2 years in now.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking. So we've been doing this work, like I said, for a number of years. And a couple of years ago, I thought, well, we're not seeing the numbers move. Like, we're not seeing reduction of things that are bad or increases of things. Change is kind of slow. Do I personally keep doing the things I'm doing? Is it making a big enough impact? It takes a lot of work to do. Or do I do something different? Or, by the way, Tom, do I go to Hawaii and spend more time on the beach, right? And really, I have a part of my doctoral work is around societal change. And so I read a book called How Change Happens that really gave me all these ideas on this systems thinking and how if we pull together in ways that Utah hasn't, and I don't think any other state, pull together everybody that's working in these spaces in more collaborative, more strategic ways, can we shift things? And as I looked at the data, the way that we were going, it's 3 to 4 decades to make any notable progress. And I'm like, that's not good enough for my daughter. That's not good enough for my 3 granddaughters. Or can I say their families, and that includes boys and men. When you have negative experiences or lack of opportunity for women, that impacts their families. So it's not, oh, you're doing women's stuff and ignoring boys and men. I encourage anybody that wants to work in the boys and men space, please do what I'm doing on this other side, right? And so what we did is launched in 2023 a 7-year movement called a Boulder Way Forward that does just what I was talking about, pulling in partners, pulling in people around the state in 18 areas. I know that sounds like it's so many, but as we look at the holistic picture of what impacts women, there are education things like finance and higher ed attainment and K through 12 experiences for girls. There's a bunch of workplace, like, oh my gosh, every county mentioned the shortage of childcare and good pre-K programs. But things like the pay gap and entrepreneurship, opportunities to start business. There's also that safety and security. child sexual abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, the poverty and homelessness, and also sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination. A lot of things people don't like to talk about, but they impact so many women here in this state. And then, of course, another area is around getting more women in political office on boards and commissions. So it's a major undertaking. After 2 years, and by the way, we had about 1,000 people at our summit last month, and we have about 275 leaders across the movement. We have 29 county coalitions, and we have about 6,000 people engaged. And it has to grow a lot more to really get to the point where every individual and every family knows the resources that are available and messages, right? That women need to go, men too. We need to go to college, need to stay in college. We need to graduate from college. And for women, we have the biggest gap in the whole nation on graduate degrees between men and women. So for women, you can continue. You can go and get a graduate degree, and it's important, not just for pay. That's important. Increasing those salaries, but also for community impact. You just learn more when you have more education, right? Mm. And we have great options for master's degrees and even doctorate degrees here at Utah State University.
I want to dive into some of the recent research papers.
Great.
Very interesting. If you just joined us, we're talking with Susan Madsen, who's director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project. It's based here at Utah State University.
Yes.
In the Huntsman School. You started at Utah Valley University,
yes.
Right? And then moved. We're happy you moved.
And I've been here about 5 years.
Yeah.
I was at Utah Valley for about 18 years.
Yeah.
And having babies before that.
Right,
so
right.
That's what we as women do, right?
Living the life, right? Living the life. So I want to start with this one, and you can find all these at usu.edu/UWLP.
Yeah.
So this is research on Utah women and mental health. So where do you situate Utah in terms of in the nation?
Yeah, we really looked at mental health for women specifically. So sometimes we compare to men. We have known for years in terms of rankings that, especially in Wallet Hub, they use one ranking on depression. And we have ranked actually in the bottom 5. So we're 46th right now. Of course, 1 is the lowest level of mental health challenges. We're down there, and we've known we as women in the state of Utah have significantly more than women in other states. There's a few hanging out there with us at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so there's some serious mental health challenges in terms of depression. Some of the new data that's come in that we talk about the report are really about this age group of 18 to about 30, 35. And I'll tell you, that's skyrocketing. In fact, about a third of women in Utah in those age groups say that in the last month they've had 7 or more days of really negative mental health, which those measures have been taken for decades, and they are going up. And so that includes our college students, right? And so that population has really increased, which is sad. We also know, and we don't have the exact Utah data, but we know a couple years ago the CDC released a report nationally that 60% of girls 9th grade to 12th grade, 60% struggled with depression, anxiety, and I can't remember the percentage with suicide ideation. And we're increasing with men too, but there's some serious concerns, and we're definitely struggling in Utah more than the nation.
What are the factors? Do we know why?
There's a lot of factors that are similar across the nation, but I really, in our report, we talk about a few that are unique, and one unique in some ways, and one really is let me start with the general ones. The isolation. More people are not connected the way that they used to, and you and I are a little bit older, so we remember coming out on our porches more and interacting more. But the isolation that was really, the big challenge during the pandemic has really impacted mental health across the nation. One of the things in our report we emphasize in the state of Utah is our violence rates. We really are, when we have, higher numbers than a lot of folks, a lot of states around. But we also, have you heard of ACEs? Do you remember those?
I haven't. No, I can't place that.
Adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
So a child sexual assault would be one of those. But we actually are significantly higher than most states in the number of ACEs, which is really sad because there's been longitudinal research, especially for decades out of Kaiser, that's headquartered, I believe, in California, that have followed people and how many ACEs. So ACE could be there are drugs in the home, you have an alcoholic parent, there's domestic violence or abuse in various kinds of ways in the home, all of those. And then you count how many a child has and the likelihood that child will, when they grow up, have significant issues, including committing suicide. It's just skyrocketed the more you have. And you would think that that would be lower in a more conservative religious society. But for some reason, and that's another topic for another day, we have a lot of those. And so that moves into mental health. You're going to have mental health. You can heal from those things. And I fortunately haven't experienced those, but man, have I talked to hundreds and hundreds or received emails from hundreds and hundreds of women around our state who have experienced those. And so we really emphasize that and just some other lack of opportunities and those kinds of things that we found in other research as some of those reasons. I don't think anybody knows for sure everything and why. We've dabbled in some other space of expectations of women and not meeting, because we have more. There's been some research to say that more women in more religious societies have higher level of perfectionism, and sometimes that just you can't ever. I mean, if we expect perfection, we're all going to be disappointed because we're not perfect people. So there's been some research dabbling in the religious culture, how sometimes that can be negative. There's some new research that, of course, sometimes that can be positive, too, if it's the right culture, the right at the local level. You can just rally and have those connections. And so we're trying to think about that. Mm-hmm. How can it's a risk factor in some ways, but it could be a protective factor. So I'm not dinging religion because I'm a very religious person myself. It's just when you get to the research, you have to put in reports what the research is finding.
What's being done to address these mental health
Not enough.
concerns? Not enough.
But one of our partners really is fairly new. I think it's just a couple years old. The Huntsman Mental Health Institute at the University of Utah. That was a really great addition for the state. There's some great. Speaking of children, the Children's Center of Utah is amazing. I'm good friends with Rebecca, who's the executive director. Believe it or not, Tom, there's this whole, and they have, I don't remember, 60, 70, 80 therapists, this whole area of working with children 0 to 5. Isn't that kind of crazy?
Wow.
You wouldn't think that, but there's, and of course they get into some of our populations that are come out of poverty and those kinds of things that have experienced some things like that. So there's some areas of that. Boulder Way Forward is one of the first within our spoke on health across the lifespan. We actually have a sub-spoke on mental health. And so when you look at mental health challenges, some of them are across gender. Men have different challenges, though, with mental health, and women have unique challenges with mental health. I mean, we have a whole study that we wrote up in one of our snapshots on maternal mental health. and that's an issue here in Utah. So some interesting. So we're really addressing that in Boulder Way Forward. But I'm learning a lot, Tom. I'm not an expert in every one of these areas, but learning a lot. We need to do more. We need to do more. And can I just say real quickly, when a couple years ago we did a whole bunch of gatherings for women of color. So one for Hispanic women, one for Pacific Islander, and one for Black and Native American and so forth. And I learned a lot by really writing those reports and about how important it is for women, their identity as women of color, to actually have available therapists and social workers and others who look like them, who are women first. I mean, there can be good men therapists, right, too, but sometimes you just need another woman as a woman and men as men. But if there's a whole thing, and I'm a white woman, but I've realized and been taught through the years that race, it was invisible to me that there really are different experiences, and we need more therapists. We need more women of color to engage in some of these areas that we really need help, not just anybody, but very specific areas. We need more of everybody in mental health, though, professions, don't you think?
Yeah, that's certainly
My
true.
own daughter is actually working on a nurse practitioner, she's a psych nurse, but really working on a master's right now. And I've heard that's a very marketable area for anybody listening to go into a nurse practitioner psych area.
Right. If you just joined us, we're talking with Susan Madsen, Director of Utah Women in Leadership Project. I wanted to go to another recent study, Utah Women in Finances. It's interesting that, use my own wife as an example, she is a financial whiz, right?
Oh, yeah.
And much more than me, so I rely on her.
That's not normal.
But not normal. That's where I was going with that. Apparently, that's not normal.
No, it's not.
Or it's not where we'd like it to be, right? Overall. Tell me about this.
Well, first of all, we need all men and all women to be really aware, educated around finances. We have to. But it's very interesting to look at Utah data and national data. And by the way, we've got to have more Utah data. So if any of you are in the space of research around finances, we need to make sure gender is a component of all studies so we can see this. But what we know is there's a lot of women in Utah that are just not comfortable with numbers. And you hear these messages from the time you're young, and it's across the world. But in Utah, we're actually at the bottom in terms of 8th grade math scores between boys and girls. We have the biggest gap. So boys, but yet genetically, we're just as women. We can do math just as well. So there's some messages that girls are getting stronger than other states, that we're not supposed to be good with numbers and math. And that's unfortunate because we all can be good at, we can be better. Maybe some of us are not the best in math and others of us are. But what's interesting is there's been some research. Do you remember that our senior, not just our seniors, but in high school, we're one of the few states to have a financial literacy class. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what's interesting is we've gotten some data for a few of these years, a number of these years. And even at the end of courses, there's some questions about confidence and competence. And it's interesting because it doesn't matter what your grade is. Women are just not feeling like they know the information, not confident. And that goes with some of the research. Men and boys are just more confident even if they have no clue what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. My husband and I laugh about that a lot. And then we follow men even if they don't know. Mm-hmm. But often they do know what they're talking about. But women have less confidence. So there's some genetics and socialization with a lot of socialization. So it's interesting to look at that. And then we've struggled getting data. We've gotten some. We have some dashboards on what we're trying to change. But, I live in my bubble sometimes. And I always just assumed that most people have an emergency savings plan, like even 1,000. I've been shocked at how many families here in the state of Utah, if paycheck to paycheck, even $1,000 they would be under. And so really helping women understand, men too, right? But women understand we need to increase those savings. So we've collected data on confidence and competence, like we said, and we're hoping with the Boulder Way Forward in the next 5 years, we're going to see those increases with, we can all do money. We can all be better with money, right?
Right.
But it's critical today that everybody in the household, including your teenagers, actually, I'm going to take that back, including your 2 or 3 year olds, you can start having them do we even have piggy banks anymore?
I don't know if we have piggy banks anymore. Yeah.
But when you put money, what we found from a study 15 years ago is when you start talking to your little kids about college and they can put money away for college, it's more likely when we looked at the difference, they were graduates from college. If they started, the younger they can.
Yeah.
And so we just need to be encouraging our girls, our sons and daughters at a young age to understand what they're spending money on, how to save, all of those things so that we can just be better. You probably know that we're high bankruptcy rates in the state of Utah.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Unfortunately, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but personal finance folks tell us that mostly men come to them, and that when there's women and men come, oftentimes the wife defers.
Yes.
So your situation is great in terms of your wife, but then I would say you need to know what's going on with your money. My husband and I split it up. I do the week to week. He likes to do investments and all of that, and so we kind of split, but then we update each other on where we're at least once a month.
Yeah. I will say my credit rating wasn't too bad, right? But after I got married, my credit rating is at the very top. My wife keeps us right up there. So
you know what? I like high credit ratings as well.
This just one more thing on this study. This really stood out to me. Talking about parents talking to your children about money. 76% of parents would rather discuss the 2024 election than finances. Which is so foreign to me. Stay away from politics, right? Just stay away from it. But I guess finances are. Some parents don't want to talk about it.
We've found from national research that has been the trend even, and a lot of parents just don't talk to their kids. They keep them a little bit in the bubble and just kind of pay for things or whatever. But the research does tell us that you've got to be talking to your children and teaching them all the way up, especially the principles of savings and staying out of debt. I have not seen gender-specific data, but we know that the debt for college students is and when you get is great and it is high, but it's not all for tuition. And it's not all for books. It's for big car payments. It's for a lot of things. I don't know. I was raised, and do we still call them clunkers?
Yeah, right. Lemons, I guess. Yeah.
We just barely got by. We couldn't drive very many. But the expectations of some of our kids are that I should start where my parents left off. So the only way to change that, I think it's in the home.
Yeah, talking about it. You mentioned confidence. That's a key, right? I guess something in the socialization, right? Yeah. We socialize our boys to be more confident than girls.
Yeah.
I'm reading here an article, in this case in the Daily Herald. You say that previously you wrote an article titled "Troubling Research on Girls, Confidence, and Social Media." And you're sharing some findings of a large study published in 2023 called the Girls Index.
Yeah, it's a national study.
Tell me a little bit about this. Confidence and, I guess, social media drives down confidence, does it?
Oh, yeah. Confidence is interesting. I've studied it in depth and read a lot of research. By the way, girls and boys are typically the same in terms of confidence, generally until puberty. And then boys go up and girls decrease. So that's interesting, and it impacts a lot of things unless interventions take place. So specifically about this research study, I really wrote a number of things about it. And I've been studying and paying attention to the impact on girls and young women of social media. And so I chunked that up, put it in the Daily Herald, ran a series with the Daily Herald on that. And it's so striking, the negative impact of social media. And we see that in Utah. And we don't have state-specific data in that source. But we tend to know that in Utah, in fact, we have a study that we're going to update fairly soon in the next couple of months. It should come out on cosmetic surgery and our whole outward appearance. And we know from some of the research we're really high on those kinds of things, on cosmetic surgery, but on searches like breast augmentation, on long eyelashes, on things that just say our outward appearance is so important. And so there's some evidence to say that. So we think that some of these issues are more in Utah, but we don't know. So bottom line, there's a lot of mental health challenges because of social media. And I did a gendered thing a few years ago on social media's impact on boys and men, or boys and young men mainly, and girls and women. And it's different. And girls are impacted significantly more than boys. And their looks. And so if you look on Instagram or whatever, I don't know if you're on those. I'm on there because I need to post for work, but also my grandkids are on there. So,
right.
So oftentimes girls are taking pictures of themselves. And so trying to manipulate and then see how many likes are on there and all of that. And interestingly, I learned this a few years ago, that a lot of men and boys' pictures are what they're doing. They're not. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a couple years ago. I'll have to pay attention and see if that's still the case today. Mm-hmm. But when you hold yourself and your body and up to standards of somewhat perfection on people with manipulated images, you're always going to fall short in a big way.
Yeah. How can we help girls and women with
That's
this?
What I've been wrestling with. Yeah. There's this whole piece, and I have a whole bunch of books at home on my bookshelf on identity, your identity and the formation of identity. And we just have to make sure we're raising these girls differently in terms of, we have a habit here in Utah, but it's around the nation, and I bet you say this, is for girls and your wife maybe, that we start with looks. Oh my gosh, I have Savannah and Hadley. Hadley's 6 and Savannah's 22 months. They're my grandkids. They have the cutest clothes sometimes, and they're just so cute. And so I've really tried not to focus on, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so, because that continues, and they get those messages all the way. But the reason I'm mentioning your wife is a lot of times when men introduce their wives, what's the first thing you say when you introduce your wife? Probably, if you're like most men, I won't put you on the spot. Here's my beautiful wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you heard that a lot. Yeah.
And that's again, you don't say that to, although when I'm doing my husband, I say, this is my handsome. I really push that. But we have this habit of making it about looks. So what can we do is your question? We can make sure, first of all, if you haven't read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, read it. I wish I would have read it years ago because it gives you language on fixed mindset versus growth mindset and the kinds of things that are better to stay with kids on their actions, what they're taking, not their existence, what they look like. They're fixed. So if you say you are smart, that's a fixed mindset. And so if a girl fails a 3rd grade maths test, I'm not smart anymore. It's all or nothing instead of effort. So we need to notice effort. you tried, you worked hard. So it's a language change, but the more we can get an appetite, and I see this in boys too, because what we know from the research is if we're talking to them and encouraging them and they hear fixed mindset, that they don't enjoy the journey of work and learning. It's all or nothing. And so that's why sports and other things are so good for kids, because you don't win it all, or, you lose and win some things, but that effort. So that's really the key. So I think that works as well. Can't remember where we're at. How did we get over there? Oh, the article on the Daily
Right.
Herald.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, I just it's kind of a crisis of your topic of mental health. And then social media and confidence, it's all kind of wrapped into this interesting place. Also, I truly believe, and it's supported by research, that if we can keep our kids, our girls, engaged in meaningful things where they look outward, they serve, they lead, they know that their head, heart, and hands really matter, how they're thinking, their strategy, what they're passionate about, and what they can do. It's going to be better for them. It's going to be better for the community. And by the way, we're just starting. We have 2 of them going, Boulder Way Forward clubs in high schools.
Oh.
Isn't that
Yeah,
awesome?
yeah,
And it's not just for girls. Boys can come. We need male allies. We have a whole impact team on male allies. And so welcome our boys and men into this work, because it impacts your families and future families. And so, it's for everybody that wants to be engaged. So we're hoping next year at our Boulder Way Forward Summit in June, I'm really thinking let's pack it with some high school aged and college aged. We're ready to bring those folks in, because everybody should care about reducing violence for sisters, and sometimes it happens to men too, right? Mm-hmm. But if we reduce violence for girls and women, we're going to reduce violence for boys and men too.
We're talking with Susan Madsen, who's director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project. Great to have her in studio today. We were talking before we went on the air. You mentioned an article that gotten a lot of hits.
Yeah.
I just mentioned why calling women girls is a bigger deal than you may think. So
it's interesting. It just came out last week in the Deseret News, actually, and it's trending pretty well. And I put it on LinkedIn, and people are learning. I think I've gotten a lot of appreciation for the article. And basically, there's just habits for us to call grown women girls. And you don't necessarily do that with men. You don't call them boys. And so a lot of times it's like the men and the girls. Or even guys and girls aren't the same. So men goes with women, ladies, gentlemen. Guys, do you know what goes with guys? Gals.
Right.
Boys, girls. And so really girls in a lot of the literature really is that 12, and younger. And so what I've spent some time looking at the research on when people call you, or sometimes yourself, you call yourself girls as a grown woman, what does that do? And it does lessen and make you feel like you're juvenile, you're less than, you're a little presence. And we love our girls when they're young, right? So sometimes people will say, well, the girl's in the front office or something, thinking that doesn't. And sometimes we as women say, hey, we're girls, this and that. But research tells us there's a problem with that. We just need to call women women.
Yeah.
And some women in college, and they're like, I'm not a woman yet, but they're not a girl. So young women is what we use. Sometimes that's used around the United States and world. Some people in Utah have given me some pushback on that. They're like, but that's a church term. I'm like, it's not a church term.
Right,
It is, but
Yeah.
it's not only.
Yeah.
We don't just have that captured for the state of Utah.
Right.
And so, I have more in the article. If you just search Susan Madsen, girls, women. Well, that would
Right.
might come up with a million things. Calling girls women.
Calling girls women, yeah.
Or women girls.
That's what I did, is essentially that, and I got the article pretty quick.
Great.
By the way, just parenthetically, I'll hear certainly mixed groups of young people will say, "Hey, you guys," but I've been interested if it's all women, they'll say, "Hey, you guys."
Yeah.
I guess that's become the generic.
And that one, I don't have a hard stance on that one because I was raised playing sports too, and it is more of a masculine thing. But I'm like, hey guys, sometimes I'll say that, but some people that's tough on them if you're not in that culture. They're like, I'm not a guy, that's a man. And so I'm paying attention to my own. Sometimes people say, "Oh, don't tell me what to say exactly." But I think I used to be like that, but I've really learned a lot through the years that to really be a better human being, we want to make sure we do the best we can to be respectful for people. Can I just tell you, I got called out years ago, probably 15, maybe 20 years ago, on calling women girls. And it took me, and I still slip, but it took me a lot of years because we're so socialized into doing that, to get rid of that in my own language. So it's not easy, but just know there's research backing that we really need to be calling women women and not girls.
Finally, we're just about out of time. I wanted to go to this white paper just published last month, What Utahns Can Do to Strengthen Girls and Women, Findings from Community Conversations Across Utah. So just tell me very briefly what some high points from this.
Yeah, we did go to 29 counties and have leaders and residents come together. We tried to get between 25 to 35. So we had more in Salt Lake County that wanted to come, and just ask them, what can you do in your county to strengthen the impact of girls and women? It doesn't take from boys and men. That's another thing. It was interesting. We published reports in the last couple of years on every one of them, but this white paper brought all of them and said, what are the themes? Well, it's really interesting, a couple of them. The child care I mentioned earlier, the child care issues. I'll go back to one that, we're at USU, the importance of how they can get their daughters and other young women, girls in the community to understand that college is critical. Going to college, finishing college, even starting with in some rural communities, even starting with technical college 1 year, but keep going when you can. Get that associate's, 2-year we call it, but that doesn't always work in 2 years. Right. And then keep going to that. So there was a lot of discussion around that education and also discussions around culture and how through the decades it's not really been encouraged in some places for women to go to college, but for any women to even think about a career. And I'll tell you, Tom, when you get into the data and the housing prices and costs, it's rare, especially for all my kids are in their 30s now, to be able to afford a house and a family, unless if there's two parents in the home, they're both working. And so even if you're working part-time doesn't mean you're just working at a department store or working for low pay. If you have a good degree, you can do part-time IT, you can do part-time therapy. If you're a therapist, there's a lot of options. And so having and helping your girls, it's not either or. You can still, if you want to be a mom and have families, I did that, right? You can do that. And you can think about a career, and that career doesn't mean you have to work full-time all the time that your kids are in school. But I'll tell you, working part-time here and there, keeping your skills up, some of these professions have changed. They're not the same as you took in your college classes. Things, technology, and now AI, right? It's a different, You can't jump right in some jobs, and you just need some extra training.
Yeah.
And so, man, there's some organizations we partner with, like People Helping People, that take women who have just are not prepared. Their husbands have died, left, or whatever. They have no skills that they think of. We help them figure out they do have more than they think. But it's a painful process. We just encourage all men and women to have good education, to have good skills, and then you make your choices on what's best for your families.
Right. Well, we'll leave it there, out of time. Much more we could say to encourage people to go to the website, right? usu.edu/UWLP.
Or utwomen.org. That's our easy way to get there.
utwomen.org. All right, utwomen.org.
And also boulderwayforward.org.
Okay, boulderwayforward.org. Well, we've been talking with Susan Madsen, who's director of the Utah Women and Leadership Project. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone, for listening to Access Utah.